I'm starting to see that again. Deer coming out in my backyard. That's the first deer I've seen in my backyard in probably 2 weeks. I think that's an indication of some changes that we're seeing in the behavior. Well, I appreciate you joining me today for this episode of the Whitetail Watch produced by Hoyt's Bow Hunting Whitetails. I want to talk about the behavior like I said, but I also want to take a look at the rut, this year's rut, and kind of give my thoughts on the fact that the rut is really not what we think it is. We think the rut is sort of this ongoing, every day is, full bore, bucks hunting does. But after hunting every day of the rut for 35 seasons, I now can say that that's not the case. So let's hear from our sponsors, and I'm going to come back and talk about these two topics. Hoyt's Bow Hunting Whitetails is brought to you by Redneck Blinds, Code of Silence Apparel, Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail App, Whitetail Institute, Research Equals Results, B3 Releases, XO Broadheads, Exact Sights, Muddy Outdoors Tree Stands, Stealth Cam Trail Cameras, and Hoyt. Okay, so let's talk about the subject that I really want to cover first, and then we'll come back to the rut predictions or the behavior predictions for this coming week. I mentioned that after all these seasons of hunting every day of the rut, I've come to the conclusion that it's not always good. In fact, in my opinion, in my experience, it seems like on average there's only about 4 good days every season to the rut. I think you get one really good day on average in late October, when the bucks that you're hunting or the buck that you're hunting is on his feet and covering some ground, maybe looking for that first hot doe. That seems like one time frame. Maybe it's a day, maybe it's 2 days in late October, first couple of days of November. And then you get into maybe that first week of November, and there's usually a fast action day in there. When the bucks are on their feet by themselves looking for does. That's what I'm talking about by good days during the rut. You can always get lucky at any time and have a hot doe come past your tree stand, and then you'd swear that every buck in the whole county is right there. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about 4 days or roughly 4 times during the season when mature bucks are on their feet during daylight. It just doesn't happen that often, not near as often as we'd like to think. And that's been the biggest disappointment, I think, over the years for me. I thought, boy, the rut's here, I'm going to be seeing bucks cruising all the time. And you rarely do. Like I said, you might get lucky and catch 3 or 4 days when that's happening. So it gets back to the second one, sometime in early November, usually sometime around the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. I think the buck maybe gets freed up from the first doe that he found, or maybe the second doe. But anyway, there's a time frame there where they're a little bit more active and on their feet by themselves again. I'm not sure the exact reason why. And then you may not see much of them again, like I said, until you get lucky and a hot doe brings him past, or brings a bunch of bucks past. So let's say there's one time when that happens, where you're in the right place at the right time. And then there's probably one really good movement day on the very tail end of the rut. And that's the week that we're coming up on now. Some of that's weather driven. Like I said, we've got some really nice weather right now. I mean, this storm blew out, and I'm getting some sunshine now for the first time in a few days, and the breezes are blowing. It's pretty comfortable, pretty seasonal weather. So maybe we're gonna run into that one day when it seems like everything clicks and the bucks are on their feet during this week ahead. But my point in all of this is to say that the rut isn't a non-stop parade of bucks. The rut really is a lot of starts and stops. Slow days, maybe 2 or 3 of them in a row, followed by one really fast day. And it's really hard to predict when those are going to take place. You have to be there. You have to be out there as often as you can for as long as you can, so that you're in the right place at the right time when the pieces do come together. And sometimes you're not. You can hunt great areas for the whole season and just not be in the right place at the right time, even during the rut. So don't get bummed out if it seems like you missed the action this year. It's not easy to catch this just right, even though this is supposed to be far and away the best time of the year to kill a big whitetail with a bow. So we can touch more on that in the future. Gosh, I'm beginning to think more and more that late October is really the prime time. And you get into November and it's just so spotty, so hit and miss. But let's move on. Let's talk about what's coming up in this week that's ahead of us. I've talked in the bow hunting whitetails episode, the most recent one, about what the second half of the rut looks like and how to hunt it. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot more detail there. I'm going to refer you to that episode. I think I covered that pretty well there. But as you look at the weather patterns now coming up, I see a lot of seasonal temperatures, more what I would call consistent November, mid-November type of weather. I don't see anything in the forecast that's either a positive or a negative. It's neutral. Now we're just dealing with the rut phase, what the bucks are going to be doing. And I think, increasingly, you should still be able to catch a few of them. Kind of like I alluded to, there's that fourth great day during the rut, and that's sometime this coming week, in the next 7, 8, 9 days, which could include this coming weekend, when you're going to get a buck that is looking for another doe, even when most of the does are already bred and out of estrus. So when that happens, they have to hunt more, they have to look more aggressively for the next or the last hot doe, if you want to call it that. Early in the rut we talked about the first hot doe. Now we're talking about maybe the last hot doe and how that can bring out some really good mature buck movement. So I think you've got that ahead of you. I believe, as I mentioned in that episode on bow hunting whitetails, that the doe bedding areas are going to be prime locations in the mornings, and increasingly the bucks and the does are going to be moving towards food. So if you've got good food sources in the area where you hunt, that's definitely a go-to spot for afternoon hunts, especially after about the 25th, 26th of November. The rut is more or less on its last legs at that time, and you're going to find most of the activity moving towards food. So that's kind of my recommendation, I guess, for the coming week. I'm going to be at it as hard as I can until, our firearm season doesn't come in until the first Saturday in December. So I've got a lot of time left, but I do feel like the rut is on the definite wind down, and I'm going to take as much advantage of these last days as I can. So I'm going to be hunting, like I said, I'm going to be hunting the doe bedding areas in the mornings and maybe in the afternoons. And I'm going to try to find some spots around food in a few areas where I can hunt later, towards the end of this week, probably even, through the weekend or past the weekend. Well, that's it for this week. I appreciate you joining me. I'll see you back here again in another week for the next episode of the Whitetail Watch, produced by Hoyt's Bow Hunting Whitetails. And remember to always dream big.